Well, the field has never been more crowded, and not just crowded quantitatively, but qualitatively. So it really is, this expression, the golden age of television, has never been more golden. And I think one of the things, or the thing you have to do is really state why this show is relevant to an audience, why it will be. You know, you have to get kind of grand in your themes and in your ideas, and in why this is why it's interesting to you. Because at the end of the day, if it's not interesting to you and deeply interesting to you, you can't presume it'll be interesting to an audience who have so many options in front of them. So today at the panel, that was kind of the recurring theme through different prisms. Each of us have very different points of views, but it's always about telling a story and finding characters who can distinguish themselves in the noise, you know, to not be familiar. You know, why is the story worth telling? I have been doing this for 30 years, and you'd think that I knew, and I guess I know more now than I knew then, and maybe now more than I did 10 years ago, but I have no idea. Which is to say, I know things that interest me, and I'll go in and present them, and I'm stunned that they interest nobody else. So I don't know, and so I'm surprised by the things that interest, you know, I go, that's an okay idea, but it doesn't really grab me, and they love it. So I don't know what it is. I can't imagine. I never retrofit what the marketplace may be looking for. I always am kind of a story junkie. I'm mining for stories that interest me, and that I might want to see, or characters whose situations are interesting to me. So, and then I hope that the market. I assume again, if I'm interested, in some very basic way, and I'm leaning forward into the story, there's a series there, hopefully. You know, it was presented to me while I was finishing 24, the 8th season of 24, and my agent brought me an Israeli script that had not even been shot yet, and it really was. It was served as the inspiration for Homeland, but really bears very little resemblance. It's about 2 returning soldiers who are Israeli soldiers who come back, but there really is no terrorism. There's no Carrie Mathison. There's no Saul Berenson. There's no, you know, turned soldier aspect. It's really more of a Rip Van Winkle story. But the idea that interested Alex and me at the time was, and then Alex, who was also working on 24, who's, you know, my oldest friend, and I said, you know, maybe let's do this together. And what interested us was that on television there was no story about a soldier who'd returned from war, and that was an interesting idea. And then the ideas that sort of were animating to 24, which is very much about, in a post 9/11, you know, we needed a hero, and that's why that show kind of took flight. But 10 years later, after two problematic wars that we'd engaged in, and the price of the war on terror, which included, you know, invasion of privacy and price and a cost to our security that was unclear to people. So there was a story 10 years after 9/11 that we felt could be told through the prism of this particular character, who we invented kind of in some ways from Jack Bauer's rib, Carrie Mathison. We knew in some level we were fishing in the same pond, but at a different time, and telling this part of the same ongoing story. But Carrie was someone we knew was kind of like Chicken Little, someone who was underestimated, really gifted, bore the weight of the of this question of the war on terror, but also was somebody who was discredited, institutionally discredited. So she was, you know, a character who interested us, and her mark being a returning soldier. So when we came up with that, you know, that relationship, we felt we'd found something that was interesting to us. Now, even then, we said, well, people don't really care about terrorism. I think they're tired. There hasn't been an attack on the homeland, and we weren't even. I mean, so these characters were interesting to us, and these ideas were interesting to us. We even assumed people were fatigued by this whole thing, and we had very little. We liked it, but we didn't know that anybody else would. So the fact that it has caught on in the way it's caught on has been delightful and surprising to us. Well, Tyrant is in its 2nd season, which launches in 2 weeks, June 16th. It's been really exciting. I mean, similarly, there was a story there that was interesting to me that I think what drew me to the project was that you look at the New York Times, and half of the ink is about Iraq, Egypt, Syria, that part of the world that really is undergoing this seismic political and social, theological earthquake. I mean, ISIS. I mean, we're seeing, I think, an historic and tragic story unfolding in the newspaper, and in some ways Tyrant was an opportunity for me to try to take characters through a story about two brothers and a woman, pretty classic biblical story, and with that very human entry point, find characters to sort of find another side of the story that's happening across the world that I think we all are feeling the echoes of here. So it was a big, a political minefield of potential, political incorrectness and all sorts of, cultural presumptions on my part. But I think it's been a great and challenging experience. But I hope the second season, I hope people like it. I think that you bring up a great question, which is, what do the price of success is the responsibility you have to the story that interested you in the first place. And endings are, in many, many ways, I find much harder than beginnings. So if you're lucky enough to have achieved liftoff with a show, how do you bring it down to a landing without crashing the whole enterprise? And I think that's one of the big challenges, and shows that have done it, I really applaud. I mean, I think more have not ended well. And they've either not ended because the creative enterprise fights the commercial one. People say there's more, the studios will want to sort of slice as much meat off the bone as they can until there's really nothing left. And you have to know when to get off stage. And so I think for a series like Homeland, at some point, Alex Gonza, who's running the show, will have to decide, and hopefully we'll decide together when it's time to bring this thing in to a proper and graceful conclusion. One of the big tips is tell the story before you go to the people who are the gatekeepers, who are the decision makers, is tell your girlfriend, tell your brother, tell your mother, tell your friend, just tell the story to people who are the audience, and take constructive criticism. Some of these pitches were half-formed or poorly formed, and Mark Gordon, of course, who's the best, was keeping it going like a game show host. But you want to make sure that they don't fall asleep, that they understand what you're talking about. So it really is to be concise, to be interested, to not be overzealous, but to be clear and tell and sort of answer those big questions, and to present it in the right order. A lot of people really were telling. One of the pitches, for instance, was like I described it as 100 introductory sentences, but we never got to the pith of what is the show. I mean, you'd be astounded by how elusive the question of what happens week to week, who are these people, and what happens week to week. And we heard some stuff today that talked around it, but never really got to answer those very basic questions. What's the show? What am I seeing?